Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to an episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, here to bring you the topic du jour. A lot has happened this week, midweek. And by a lot, I mean mostly baseless speculation, which is the best kind of speculation. But it's fun talk. Obviously, earlier this week, we heard the news that Myles Garrett is formally requesting a trade from the Browns. This is not surprising per se, given the state of the Browns, and the team's in a really bad way. Thanks, Browns, for taking on Deshaun Watson, by the way. But it's a bold thing. It's going to be a blockbuster trade if and when it happens. But I actually do think that there is a slim chance, but a realistic chance that the Falcons could be in on this deal, or at least kick the tires in a serious way, like maybe one of the teams involved in these talks. And I think the reasoning should be obvious, right? The Falcons desperately need a difference maker on the defensive line. They have not had luck finding that in the draft or free agency. They tried to get Matthew Judon in here. That didn't work. And a lot of people would say, oh, well, aren't you just trading for another old pass rusher? No. No. Matthew Judon at his peak was not Myles Garrett. So, this is a one-of-one superstar player coming available in a trade. And honestly, he is on the older end. I think he'll be 29 this season. But that's, edge rushers typically play pretty well into their early 30s, like 31, 32. So I think if you're the Falcons, you're making this trade expecting probably at least 2, maybe 3, or even 4 years of all-pro level play from Myles Garrett. And I think that's a reasonable expectation based on what we've seen from him. So, I think it's an interesting trade. We'll also talk about the recent Kirk Cousins kerfuffle, where he admitted that he was more injured probably than he let on. After he got hit hard in week 10, that he apparently injured his shoulder and some other things. And that's, of course, a whole can of worms. So we'll get into that a little bit today, too. Just a little topic du jour show for you guys as we get closer and closer to Super Bowl Sunday. And we're going to have some fun with that as well. So before we dive in, I want to bring you guys, of course, word from our sponsor, BetOnline, folks. The biggest betting weekend of the year is finally here, which means more updated odds and more props for Super Bowl Sunday. And BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting, with over hundreds of prop bets available, MVP odds, exclusive in-game live betting options for you as well. BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion, whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor. BetOnline offers you everything and more to enhance your game day experience. So what are you waiting for, folks? Hit up that website today. It's betonline.ag and make the game day action count just a little bit more. And when you sign up, make sure to use our promo code here. It's BELIEVE, BLEAV, to get access to the latest promotions. BetOnline, the game starts here. And of course, you guys know what time it is. Time to hop in to our final Underdog fantasy picks of the NFL season. It's Super Bowl Sunday. We're going to go big here with another 3-pack, and we're gonna make some changes. We're gonna make some adjustments. The current strategy wasn't working, right? I needed to pivot. It got closer last week. We hit 2 out of 3. This time though, we got to go for the whole thing. And this is an interesting matchup because we got 2 great defenses on tap. You guys know I'm a higher numbers guy. I've talked about it a lot. But this game does kind of set up for potentially being lower scoring than projections anticipate, given that the Eagles are arguably the NFL's best defense. The Chiefs are right up there as well in that regard. So I think ultimately, we might not see super high yardage totals in this one. Will the scoring still happen? That's an open question. But I think for this one, we're going to go with this 3-pack. I got Saquon Barkley with more than basically it's a half rushing or receiving touchdown. So if Barkley scores a rushing or receiving touchdown, then you're good to go. And I'm doing the same thing with Kareem Hunt, who has basically taken over the Kansas City backfield from Isaiah Pacheco. He scored a rushing touchdown in the past 4 games straight. So let's hope that streak doesn't end this week. But again, because the Eagles are so good against the pass, I do think the running game is going to be even more important for Kansas City. So I love Kareem Hunt there. Obviously, Saquon, he just incredible player, and seems to just score like wildfire, especially in these playoffs. So I'm not getting off the Saquon train this week. But where we are going to finally maybe learn our lesson, going lower on Patrick Mahomes, 253.5 number here. I was tempted to adjust this one because that's something you can do. You can adjust these numbers a bit to adjust your prize amount, your winning amount. But I'm gonna leave it as is, and we're gonna go lower because I think that Mahomes, again, it's a great defense they're going up against. Last week against Buffalo was the same thing. The passing volume just wasn't there, and I think that could play out again this week. So we're gonna go lower. This will be a 4.5 times prize amount for these three. So if you like this, go for it, guys. If you don't like these, there are a couple of promos going on right now. I know there's a free square one with Travis Kelce that's available. If you like that, I know with that one it's like a $10 maximum. But if you're looking to do like a couple of smaller ones, that's a perfect one. They also have another $10 maximum one, but they will give you a boost on your profit between 3 and 8 picks. That's another one that's going to be available up through the Super Bowl. So two good options there, but ultimately what you should do is go check out Underdog Fantasy. And when you do sign up, use our promo code BIRDS, it's BIRDS, like Dirty Birds and Brews, to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash and a free pick when you sign up. So definitely check that out. It helps us out. It helps Underdog out. We appreciate you, and we appreciate Underdog for sponsoring today's show. All right, let's jump in to this Myles Garrett trade because I know everybody wants to talk about this, and I understand why, because Myles Garrett's awesome. He would be obviously the best pass rusher the Falcons have had since John Abraham. There's not really the question of is he healthy, anything like this. No, I think that this honestly is a good, like a move for a player that would be an absolute impact starter, be the first all-pro caliber like defensive lineman this team has had in a really long time, would totally reshape this front seven. And a lot of people I've seen saying, well, the Falcons aren't one piece away. No, but like that you don't like, it doesn't matter to me. Like, you're not trading for Myles Garrett for 1 year. You're trading for Myles Garrett through his prime, essentially. So you're hoping to get, probably going to be doing like tearing up the contract, extending it out. Like there are some things with this particular situation that make it very dicey for the Browns, but very good for whoever's trading for Garrett. And we're going to get into some of that stuff, but let's just start with the basics, which is that this trade's not getting done for less than 2 firsts. Like I've seen people floating out what you need to understand is that this trade is going to cost 2 first-round picks, and that's the starting point. And the Falcons do have an advantage here because they have pick 15. I think Myles Garrett wants to go to a contender. I know he wants that. I don't blame him. But the Browns want premium compensation, and that's why I think the Falcons are probably a little more interesting than you might think, because I think there's a scenario where maybe they kind of meet in the middle, right? Like I don't think they want to send him to one of these top contending teams that's picking at the end of the first round. That's going to be a lot harder to get that deal done. But I do think that, with the Falcons having pick 15, that's a big value boost. And I think you could make the argument that the Falcons are an intriguing destination because they do have the offense intact. And that's not something he's ever really recently gotten to play with, right? It's been a struggle more or less for Garrett in Cleveland. They finally thought they were going to get that offense right with Deshaun Watson. Obviously, we know how that worked out. But in Atlanta, he's got an intriguing young quarterback in Michael Penix to join up with, and an offense that really played well, especially once Penix got in there. So you could kind of sell it. The Falcons are definitely closer to competing, than any of the teams picking ahead of them, arguably speaking, right? But I think it could be a good mix there. Like, the Browns want the pick, but also they don't want to send him somewhere terrible, right? But you know, the other thing with Myles Garrett is, we get past the 2 first-round picks. We get past the Browns are going to want to try to make him happy to some extent, which I think the Falcons are probably about the line where like you can't really trade him to anyone worse than the Falcons without him being really angry. The thing is though, like with Garrett, the team trading for him, like it is a very advantageous trade, because his base salary is basically minimized, right? The Browns have restructured his contract so many times and given him various other bonuses and things like that. There's a bunch of void years on this thing. I mean, this is a wacky looking contract. So go give it a look if you want. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think that you're looking at getting a relatively affordable contract for the next 2 years because almost all this is bonuses. And it's hard to say without, like, there's other bonuses involved and some other stuff here. The Falcons could possibly agree to, like, maybe try to take on some extra money here. I'm not really sure. Like, I think there's various roster bonuses and things. That's someone that has, like, detailed information on what these bonuses are, could probably tell you. But usually these prorated signing bonuses, which is the majority of the contract that's left right now, usually those are all paid by the team that's trading him because the money's already been paid out, right? It's a signing bonus. So it all comes due on the cap when he's traded. These other bonuses have been, it's kind of similar, but not exactly. So I don't know if the team trading for him would have to pick up all of these other bonuses to try to, I mean, I'm not really sure, but I guess the end takeaway is, like, I don't know what happens to all these other bonuses when he's traded. It could be, some extra money coming due as a result of the trade occurring and the void years coming off. I mean, I'm not really sure, but what I can tell you for sure is that this contract's going to get ripped up as soon as he gets to Atlanta, because this thing with all these void years on it, there's void years going out to 2031 on this contract. This is one of the most ridiculous contracts I've ever seen, and it's very odd to say the least. But ultimately, the Falcons probably wouldn't have to clear a ton of space to trade for him, but they would want to, like, tear this up and then obviously, like, give him some new compensation. But what could happen is they kind of cancel out that old contract and then extend him, basically, but they could probably get 2025's number pretty minimal without having to do much maneuvering, because, again, I think most of his salary this year is going to be paid by the Browns. So he may be totally willing to just be like, I'm good this year, pay me next year, and go, like, give me the contract I want going forward. This year, it's good to go. And that obviously drives the price up for him even more if the salary cap isn't that expensive. I don't know the exact details of this contract. It's like I said, it's a weird one. And that's coming from someone who looks at contracts a lot. I don't know exactly how much the Falcons would owe him. It's not a lot. They might be able to get a bargain for him this year and move the big cap hit, like, of his new contract coming in to more 2026, when the team is hopefully out of the Cousins contract and has more money to play with. But the Falcons can make the cap work. I know a lot of people are worried about the Falcons cap space. The Falcons have plenty of tools to get the cap space to make this trade done. That's not a big deal. They just have to be willing, they may have to be willing to make some deep cuts to do it. They may, have to restructure, extend, etc. They have the ability to do that without too much trouble, but they still have to do it. Got the cat cameo back there. But, yeah. So it's 2 firsts. Maybe some contract stuff will have to be involved. And then probably a player, right, to sweeten the pot. And a lot of people have mentioned Kyle Pitts. I don't think so. I don't think the Browns are interested. Pitts is expensive. The Browns have David Njoku. They don't really need a tight end. And Pitts is expensive, right? Relatively speaking. So at the end of the day, I think the Falcons, if they do trade Pitts, are going to trade Pitts to somebody else to probably recoup some draft assets if they were to make a trade like this, especially. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to be Pitts. Tyler Algier, though, is interesting because, again, you look at the Browns. They do have Nick Chubb, but Chubb clearly not the same. He's had multiple devastating injuries at this point. Probably the end of the road for Chubb soon there. They could really use an impact rusher. They haven't really gotten it out of any of their other guys. Tyler Algier has a 1,000-yard season under his belt. He's looked good when he's rotated with Bijan. I think Algier has value. He's also really, really cheap this year, which is perfect for the Browns. They need cheap. So that could be the perfect pot sweetener for them. I would hate to give up Algier. I like Algier. The insurance he brings behind Bijan is great, but it may be something that you have to do to get Myles Garrett in here. And I think there's no argument, who's going to impact the team more in an ideal scenario, right? So that's sort of the side of that. So to me, it would probably be, 2 first-round picks, 15 and 2026, and then Tyler Algier thrown in as a pot sweetener. I think that could get it done. Then it would be up to sort of the Browns and whether or not there are other crazy offers coming in. But I think that's kind of the framework for that sort of deal to happen. But, there will be other suitors. If he's seriously available, there's going to be a lot of teams clamoring. The Falcons' advantage is that they have that 15th pick, which, again, could be kind of the perfect middle ground between contender and, trash team that might have a better pick. Like, this might be sort of a sweet spot. So really hoping that could help in this scenario. Again, though, I will emphasize, not particularly likely. Like, any trade for any superstar player, unlikely to be like the Falcons that end up winning simply because there's going to be so many teams involved. But I do think it's not like crazy that the Falcons would be in on this deal and trying to negotiate something, because I think also that Garrett's timeline of his prime over the next 3 to 4 years could line up really well with Michael Penix in his cheap rookie contract years, right? I mean, obviously you lose the benefit this year with Kirk being here, but next year, the year after, you could, and you're not going to be paying Michael Penix, so you could squeeze in a huge contract for Myles Garrett in there instead as your premium player, and that could be your window, assuming things go well for this team, which that's probably the craziest thing we've talked about today. But that, I think this could line up with the timeline. I think it could line up in several ways that makes sense for this team. So we'll have to see, obviously, long term, and this is going to develop even more, I'm sure. But anyone that says they don't want Myles Garrett in Atlanta is insane. There's no better way to fix this pass rush, and again, he wouldn't do it by himself, but I mean, he would make everybody on that defense so much better. I mean, Arnold Ebiketie is probably a legit edge number 2 with Myles Garrett across from him. I think this like the Falcons aren't one piece away on defense, but Myles Garrett makes them a lot closer to a respectable defense. That kind of impact player, because they just don't have any on the defensive line right now, and they need them. They need them real bad. So that's one way to do it. So we covered that. I will real quick talk about the Kirk Cousins stuff. There was, it came out today that Cousins basically said on Good Morning Football that he took a hit during the Falcons Week 10 game against the Saints, hurt his right shoulder and elbow. That happened to be the start of the 4-game losing streak and Kirk playing like crap. Now, again, I've said it that, like, I don't really think that all of Kirk's issues were physical. They did seem to be mental to some degree, right? I mean, his arm strength was responsible for some of the mistakes, but not all of them. I think that was bad decisions, but there could be a combination of things there. But basically, like, this is totally expected, right? I think anyone that knew how this would go is, like, the team, and, like, I think some people see this as, like, adversarial between Kirk and the team. I think this is what both parties would want. I mean, I know Fontenot said that Kirk was healthy, but, basically he's kind of covering the team's ass and saying, like, we didn't think he was unhealthy. We didn't report anything. So the Falcons did disclose an injury after that game. Kirk, I think, was labeled with it for the week, but he was cleared and returned to full practice and didn't miss any practice time again. So whatever the injury was, he wasn't missing game snaps or practice reps, that's really what the NFL cares a lot about. If you're having your practice changed in any way, you have to report why. So I know people are worried that the Falcons are going to be punished for this. I don't really think so. I think if anything, this is Kirk probably downplaying the severity of the injury to everyone, including the team. Now, I think it was probably obvious that he wasn't feeling good, but I think he wasn't healthy all year to that extent. So, I mean, how different is that really? But this, again, isn't surprising. I don't think it's as adversarial as some think. I think that both sides have a reason to want to paint Kirk's struggles as being injury related and not like he's just falling off a cliff and this is what he is now. So because of that, Kirk coming out and saying like, hey, I hurt myself worse than I thought, and like that just happened to coincide with when I played my worst football. If you're trying to be traded, that's a good way to do that. I mean, I know it could also help if he were to get cut, or maybe he thinks that the team is going to hate him now, or the fans will hate him now for not disclosing an injury or whatever. The Falcons need to not let Kirk Cousins bully them. And like they just need to hold him and trade him. And that's all. I mean, you guys have heard my rant on this, but I think a lot of people would tell you they'll just cut him because, they have to. But I think this front office has an opportunity to not let Kirk Cousins bully them. The way his contract's set up, they gain nothing from cutting him. Absolutely nothing except saving a bit of money next year, right? But they could hold him, potentially get draft assets, not big ones. Nobody's delusional here. Potentially get something for him and save a lot more money if they were to trade him. So, I think they gotta stick to their guns, gotta hold out here. Don't let him bully you. And I think sooner or later a trade will materialize. Somebody's going to need a quarterback sooner or later, but will they be able to do it? Will they have the stomach for it? I don't know. I hope so, but yeah, guys. So that's basically the topics du jour, right? Myles Garrett trade. Again, if you're not start with 2 firsts, they're not going to pick up the phone, right? But financials a little bit easier to handle than I think a lot of people realize. So I wanted to touch on that too. But I'm curious to see how that develops over the offseason. Curious to see obviously what happens with Kirk and what other crazy twists and turns that saga is going to have. I imagine it'll be sweaty up until the deadline passes in March and he's either on the team or he's not. But that will be entertaining at the very least. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. We'll be back next week with our regular schedule, Tuesday takes and live, and hoping this will be the week that we get the patron live mock draft. Patrons and YouTube channel members will be invited to that. So that'll be up, I think, at some point next week. Make sure to check the Patreon and stuff like that for the firm date when that's settled. But my guess is it'll be Monday or Tuesday night, 5 or 6 p.m., something like that. Just trying to wrangle some guests for it if we can. I also don't want to put it off, because I want to get you guys some sweet content as soon as we can. So, but again, thanks to everyone for watching. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thanks to everyone for donating to the Senior Bowl Fund. Appreciate you. And yeah, we'll be back next week with more content for you. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Thanks to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring today's episode. Thanks again to BetOnline as well for sponsoring. We will see you guys next time on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Have a great day, folks.